Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Don't Like My Shed? Try this. I'm calling this pro-revenge because of the amount of work involved. But we've decided the work was worth it. ... For nearly 10 years, my family has lived next door to a gentleman who lived alone. Ours is an historic neighborhood, double city lots, with lots of hedges, bushes and trees to provide privacy. Also, I tend to be fairly easygoing about what others do on their own property. I really didn't care when our neighbor began illegally storing his large toys in his backyard. Due to the screening, I was the only neighbor who had to see his boats, ice house, teepee, yes, a full-sized authentic teepee. I never asked why he put one up. And so I never complained. And when he turned his home into a duplex, without benefit of building permits or inspections, and in violation of current zoning, again I never complained. I guessed he was now retired and needed the rent money. In any event, we've never had a problem with any of his tenants. Similarly, we never heard a peep out of him regarding our property. Not that we had any code violations or anything, but we did have a yard full of loud children and dogs for many years. And there was that one winter when we built a luge for the neighborhood kids that ran the entire fence line of our yards. Anyhow. Then our neighbor got a new girlfriend. I'm going to call my neighbor dragged around by my Dick, or Dick for short. His girlfriend will hereinafter be referred to as Martha, as she was a Martha Stewart wannabe. Martha quickly moved into my neighbor's home, and began altering it as she saw fit. The first thing we noticed was that Dick's neon sign collection was no longer visible through his windows. Ah, those bygone bachelor days. Then Dick's backyard toys were all sold. No more carefree days spent fishing for Dick. I'm guessing the proceeds went to the new patio furniture that soon appeared. Also, a second, new patio was built onto the side of the house, because the backyard patio got too much sun for Martha's taste. And since Martha didn't want Dick's cat spraying the new patio furniture, she made Dick give the cat away to his son. That last one made me a little sad. The cat had been dumped in our neighborhood a few years back, and Dick had seemed happy to have his little friend. But, again, not our business. Finally, new landscaping was installed throughout their backyard. That also made me sad because the historic plantings that helped make our neighborhood unique were ripped out and replaced with McMansion-style beds filled with wood shavings and Japanese maples. If that was all Martha did, I'd have no real problem. If Dick was willing to put up with it, why should I care, right? But then she turned her attentions to our yard. First she asked us to replace the historic wire fencing between our yards. Dick offered to split the cost, so we agreed. The old fencing had seen better days and the new chain link fence was quickly hidden by ivy and lilac bushes. Good neighbors, okay? Then Martha decided that we weren't cleaning up after our dog quick enough and called out the compliance officer. In fact, we picked up after our dog daily, but at the end of each day, not after each dump. That's a personal ick factor of mine. I can't stand picking up warm poop. The compliance officer told Martha we hadn't violated any laws while giving me a heads up on my new neighbor. Strike one. A few weeks later, I had a knock at the front door. It was the landscaper who had done Dick's yard. Martha had called them out to my address, without my knowledge or consent, to provide us with an estimate. Estimate for what, you ask? Well, Martha had suggestions for new flower beds, as well as some trees she thought I should remove because they cast too much shadow on the back half of her yard. These were 2-story tall, 80-plus-year-old oak trees. I apologized to the landscaper and sent him on his way. And my husband grumbled to Dick that our yard was our business, not Martha's. Strike two. Finally, Martha decided our gardening shed, tucked behind our garage, had to go. I'll admit, it was a rather utilitarian shed, but it was in good shape, fresh paint, and was heavily screened on all 3 sides by tall bushes. In fact, I only learned about Martha's complaint because I found a city inspector wandering around my yard looking for the shed. Because of the way it was situated, the only way someone not actually in my house could see it was if they were hanging out Dick's second-story bathroom window. I kicked the inspector off my property, and called my councilman to put a stop to the city's partnership with Martha. It was then I found out why Martha wanted the shed gone. Turns out, Martha really just wanted the screening bushes gone. She had plans for a third patio and fire pit for the back half of Dick's yard. Martha was worried, however, that the heavy bushes on the back half of our yard were encouraging mosquitoes, and she and Dick wouldn't be able to properly enjoy their evenings by the fire. She figured that if she forced us to tear down our shed, we'd then also tear down the screening bushes, and her mosquito problem would be solved. Strike 3, Martha, so time for some pro-revenge. Since we really didn't use the shed any longer, we tore it down. We also removed the screening bushes. Then we watched Martha spend a few days harassing a couple of handymen who built her patio and fire pit. It was snugged up right against our fence and looked really lovely. Then we decided that, as good citizens of planet Earth, we needed to be more environmentally proactive. So we installed a composting pile right where the shed and screening bushes had been located. After all, it's at the back of our yard and tucked behind the garage, so it really doesn't impact our enjoyment of our yard. And now every evening, we take all our food scraps, potato peelings, coffee grounds, eggshells, watermelon rinds, etc., and add it to our large, healthy compost heap. Every month or so, we add some goat manure from our friend's farm. Turns out goat manure is a can't-miss addition for nitrogen-rich compost. Some shredded newspaper doesn't really look good, but it does help balance the carbon content. Late afternoons and early evenings, about whenever Martha lights a fire, really, one of us heads out to the composting and gives it a good turning. After all, a well-aired compost heap is a happy compost heap. Dick and Martha never said anything, even though compost heaps do add to mosquito populations. The next one is titled, Burned My Ex a Big One. This may seem shady, but all is fair in love and divorce, my lawyer. My ex cheated on me numerous times, kept saying he was divorcing me. He was in Europe with the military and deployed from there to Afghanistan, and accused me of cheating all the time because I stayed in the US. I stayed because they were going to extend his tour in Europe if I joined him, and he bitched that he didn't want to stay there. He came back from his deployment and back to the US. We hadn't talked in about 6 months at this time. So he shows up and wants to work things out. Okay. I didn't know about the cheating yet. A month later, I got to a routine OB-APPT postnatal and find out that I have chlamydia. Knowing I hadn't slept with anyone but him, I knew exactly where I got it. He, of course, denies it and says I cheated. Whatever, he has it too, and suddenly he's messaging all these girls on Facebook to go get checked. So I'm 2,000 miles from my family at this point and am considering how to get the hell out of this mess. My ex becomes an alcoholic and starts being abusive. The military did nothing about it, even after the MPs arrested him 3 separate times for domestic issues. They put me in the position to have him come back home because they wouldn't keep him in the barracks and made him pay to stay somewhere else. Unfortunately, that meant he took all the money out of the account to pay for his housing and didn't care if the baby ate or had diapers. I'm stuck in this shit situation. I don't have the money to go home and start over. So I start planning on how to escape it the easiest way possible. He looks at re-enlisting, so I suggest the military base that is closest to my family. He goes for it, and within a short period of time, we're packed up and moving. I let my parents know what's going on so they're in the loop if I struggle and need to come home. We no sooner get moved and he has this massive episode with the drinking. This is my opportunity that I was waiting for. He threatens to kill himself. I call the suicide hotline and they send the MPs over. They collect him up and take him to the psych ward. He says he's changed and all of this and wants to come home. I keep pushing it off, and the military sends him to a rehab facility. At this point he's a 2x loser with the substance abuse program. I packed up while he was gone. At some point while he's gone, it dawns on him that I pushed for him to go to that particular base because it was close to home and it was an escape plan. Ding ding ding, we have a winner. So, duped him on that one. At this point, he should have learned that I'm in the planning phase of leaving him permanently and should have been a bit on guard. I hire a lawyer to draft my divorce paperwork. I filed it myself but learned quickly that if you plan on being shady, professional help makes it easier. In the state I live in, Texas, you can waiver your rights to a divorce and let the other party go uncontested. The waiver pretty much waives your rights to anything to do with the divorce and to any notice from the court about proceedings. I get the lawyer to draft up a waiver, took basically what I wanted and gave it to my ex to read. He signs the waiver without reading it, or any of the divorce paperwork, after he held onto it for a week, so he could have his lawyer look over it. I knew when he gave it back to me signed, there was no way in hell he read it or had any lawyer or paralegal read it, as nobody would be stupid enough to sign it if they had actually read and understood it. It was pretty straightforward. I don't say a word about it, play it off like it's just part of the process, and immediately, cautiously drove down, hauled idiot to the clerk to file it. Final date comes up, of course my ex has no idea it's even happening because the schmuck signed off his rights. I appear for court, talk to the judge for about 5 minutes, he signs it off and I go down to file it. I drop off a copy at my ex's work as a courtesy, his choice. I called and told him I had some paperwork for him. He completely flips his crap at work because he can't believe that it's finalized without him getting any say in it. Just last week he was talking about working it out and I hadn't argued about it, yeah, because I knew the final court date already. Why argue? Basically the last thing he ever said pertaining to the divorce was that he couldn't believe what a sneaky witch I am. Moral of the story, kids, don't smack your wife around, because she might be a sneaky witch that's smarter than you. The next one is titled, Never Wanted to Do This. Cast Amy, my ex-girlfriend. Alex, ex's brother, surprise surprise. Ex's parents. Bob, my friend. And me. Story: I met Amy when I was 27 and already had a good job in the IT department. Met her at a party and invited her over to my house. We instantly hit it off. For a year we were good friends and all my friends knew her. I even met her family, which was her parents and her younger brother. I met most of her family and friends, and after a year she moved in with me. She was a genuinely good person and was kind to everyone. Also, I thought. It was her name on the leases at the time. I was saving for a car and she paid the rent. She came to me one day saying that she had no money in her account, and when I checked, there was no money. She asked me if she could borrow my card for a day as she was going to this party with some of her friends. I didn't hesitate as I trusted her and gave her access. Well, nothing eventful for about half a year. Suddenly I had to go on a business trip for 3 weeks. This wasn't the first time, but usually it lasted only 3 to 4 days or a week. Before I went, she once again asked if she could borrow my card. I hesitated a bit, gave in eventually. When I returned, I saw a car parked outside but assumed it was one of her friends. Well, I knocked, thinking she was home, and was met by complete strangers asking what I wanted. None of my belongings were there, and by belongings I mean the TV, the Xbox, the computer in the bedroom, and none of the furniture was the same. For the first time I checked my other phone and saw tons of messages from the bank regarding money transactions. Hell, I lost all my savings and was homeless and had nowhere to go. Ended up staying at a friend's, Bob's place. The plan: well, I had to find where she had run off to. I checked at her house. Nope, locked. Called the police and alerted them about the fraud. Called her, her parents, and her friends. Eventually one of her friends told me where she must have gone, as Amy had told this to her only. I can't name the place, but I'll call it X. So there I went with Bob, who she never met, and saw her at a club with her bro. Well, turns out he was her boyfriend and not bro. So Bob met Alex the next evening at a restaurant with Amy, and over the course of a month, Bob and Alex were good friends. So one day when Alex was away, Amy came to Bob and expressed her feelings for him, and talking about how Alex was nothing but an idiot who would fall for any girl, just a piece of crap. And then she confessed about how she basically took away all my money, how she would do the same to Alex, and how she and Bob could run away and lead comfortable life. When Bob told me all of this, I realized that Alex was innocent and I could include him in my plan. So Bob had recorded this conversation, and with this recording it was easy to convince Alex. The revenge: turns out that it was Alex's name on the lease. He did want to kick her out, but I convinced him not to, and to strike at the right moment and leave her helpless. A month passed and she came to him telling how she didn't have money and if she could borrow his card. Well, she wasn't faking the fact that she had no money. She'd spent all her money on parties and other expensive stuff, and on Bob she insisted paying whenever she was with him. Anyway, Alex confronted her and kicked her out immediately, and having nowhere to go she called Bob. So the police was aware of the fraud against me, but having no evidence, I couldn't do anything. While she stayed with Bob, who alerted me as soon as it happened, I informed the police. They arrested her, and guess what? There was already a warrant for her arrest for other crimes, fraud and a hit and run and vandalism. Then I sued her. She lost the case as she couldn't afford a lawyer and had to ask her parents for all the money she stole. Her parents actually supported her in this. Her parents had to sell their house for all the money. And then she was given 15 years in prison. So now she is homeless, in debt and has no friends, and her parents can't afford to help her anymore. The last one is titled, Superintendent Doesn't Like to Delay or Cancel School No Matter How Bad the Conditions. This comes back to end her career. Both my children attended elementary school in the northern Midwest. As you can imagine, it snowed. A lot. Even with all the snow removal infrastructure, when a particularly heavy storm came along, the town just couldn't keep up with it, and the buses couldn't run. For decades, the school district dealt with this by having 5 snow days built into the calendar. If they had more than 5 snow days, the kids would go an extra days at the end of the year. For years, this system worked, and no one ever complained, except the occasional child that had to attend a couple extra days in June. Well, all good things must eventually come to an end. The old, mild-mannered super retired. A new super took his place. She was young, aggressive, and almost immediately reviled by everyone in the district. Let's call her Sue, because that's what we ultimately did to her. Sue came right out of corporate America. I don't know how she got it in her head that she wanted to run a school district, but she did. She was so inexperienced that the school board had to give her a waiver to work in our district before she could even show up for work. When the year started, Sue went on a power trip that made everyone's heads spin. She slashed hours for support staff, barred children from repeating a grade without her personal approval, cracked down on teachers taking sick time, until the union pointed out that she was violating the CBA by doing that, backed off a little but vowed to go after any staff taking sick time, stopped the weekly trip to the fitness center by the special needs class. She was like a cartoon villain. But what's important to this story, she ended the decades-old snow day system. Took the days right out of the calendar and said we wouldn't be needing them, as she was cracking down on snow days. Here's how snow days work. The transportation department keeps an eye on the roads. If they are unsafe, or even if they are safe but the forecast is looking crazy for later, they tell the super they can't safely run the buses. The super then cancels school. It's really supposed to be the transportation department's call. Well, Sue decided that she is the sole arbiter of deciding cancellations, so even if transportation says it's not safe to run the buses, she can say, tough crap. Which she did. Often. As you can imagine, this led to a lot of awkward and even dangerous situations. Buses not being able to access rural roads. Buses running an hour late. Buses running their entire route completely empty because no sane parent would send their kids to school in a whiteout blizzard. For 2 years we parents tolerated this dumb duckery, but needless to say, we were frustrated. We tried going through the proper channels. Contacting the transportation department, writing to the school board. We even wrote a collective letter to Sue personally, who, if the rumor is true, spit on our letter and tossed it in the bin. Though we did get a nice message on the school department website about how they are always thinking about the safety of the students, so that's nice, I guess. Things finally boiled over the winter of that second year. A bus went off the road. Though my kids were not on it, it shook me up. There were numerous complaints on the school's Facebook from scared and disgruntled parents. 2 years of being the only district open in the county during storms was getting on everyone's nerves. My sister-in-law is a criminal defense attorney. I am a disability advocate with a state agency, so while I'm not an expert on the law like my sister-in-law, I tend to know my way around. We met for dinner and decided that, if and when the inevitable tragedy happened, we would sue. We met a couple more times to work on our game plan. You can't sue a school district for making dumb snow day decisions, but if a kid gets hurt. The day finally came in the late autumn of the 3rd year of Sue. We had a big storm roll through in the early morning hours. Not cold enough to snow or freeze, thankfully, but extremely windy. Most of the county lost power, including the schools. Thousands of outages. Power lines down, trees down, roads closed. It was a mess. All the districts in the county closed. All, of course, except ours. Sue was never one to turn down a chance at a power trip. She ordered the schools to stay open. It was a disaster. Buses couldn't access every road to pick up students. Buses were late. Individual schools were putting out bulletins that attendance was parents' choice. Students unable to make it to school would receive a principal's excused absence, stay home if it's the safer choice. Bear in mind that all the schools were running on generators. So the high schoolers, who start an hour earlier, were sitting in the gymnasium bored. There was literally no point in having school this day. Then, the inevitable happened. A tree fell and hit a bus. And this time, my daughter was on it. Thankfully, the driver did a good job of evacuating the children and there were only minor injuries. But injuries nonetheless, all because of Sue's absurd no cancellation policy. Some ambulances showed up. 4 kids went to the hospital as a precaution. It made the news. It was time. The district sent forms to all of the parents of injured children. They would cover all medical costs and provide counseling for the kids in the guidance office, and a small cash settlement in exchange for the parents signing a release of liability. You can't sue us. But my sister-in-law and I had gotten to the parents first and advised them not to sign anything, as we were taking the district to big boy court. Some of the parents did take the settlement offered, which is understandable since not everyone likes drama. But some didn't. Some told the district right where to shove that settlement. I was one of them. Sister-in-law and I got together with a couple of the injured parents that were sick of the district's nonsense. We got our paperwork in a row and filed a suit. We filed the suit so fast that our hands burst into flames. The essence of the suit was that the district had failed their duty of in loco parentis by making unsafe transportation decisions, directly causing the crash and injuries. My sister-in-law also pulled some strings at the local newspaper and got our lawsuit a small spot on the front page. Parents came out of the woodwork to express their support. They were frustrated after years of Sue's authoritarianism. It turned into a small media circus. Well, the district's lawyers got to work and quickly realized that this was going to be a mess. A discovery process pulling up dirt, the parents of the injured children testifying, the general hatred of the district. Not to mention it appeared that they would, indeed, lose. They moved to quickly and quietly settle this case. They basically sat down with us and said, name your price. And while I cannot discuss the details of the settlement, let's just say that all injured parties were made whole. Also, the district changed their cancellation policy immediately. Now, if there was even a hint of snow or icky weather, they cancelled. A welcome change of pace. As for Sue, she became very quiet. She used to spend all day sending aggressive emails about her policies. Now, hardly a peep. All she did the rest of the year was fill the seat. As summer approached at the end of the year, Sue announced her resignation. She was leaving to pursue other interests. We think she was asked to resign. She was replaced by a superintendent who was much nicer. He rolled back all of Sue's power-trippy policies. Thanks for listening.